Please don't hurt me more, the fat girl begged as she hung helpless. But the mountain man cut her down and healed her heart. Please don't hurt me more, she whispered through cracked lips, her body trembling as the rope bit into her wrists. In the decaying cabin deep within Devil's Hollow, Celeste Hartwell, hung suspended from a beam, her skin mottled with bruises and blood. Once she'd been the bright-eyed daughter of a humble blacksmith. Now she was nothing but a broken rumor in the dark. Her captors had called her Fat Sow, useless cow, demanding to know where her father's treasure was buried. They didn't believe her when she said there was no treasure, that her father died with nothing but soot on his hands and love in his heart. 2 days of beatings, 2 nights without water. When they finally left, promising to return at dawn, Celeste sagged in the ropes, too weak even to pray. The wind moaned through the cracks of the cabin walls. Somewhere outside, a wolf cried, or maybe it was her imagination. She was slipping into that quiet place between pain and death when footsteps rustled through the brush. A man's shadow filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, the barrel of a rifle glinting in the last rays of sunset. Celeste flinched, whimpering. "Please, no more." The man's voice was low, steady, and human. "Easy now. I'm not one of them." In 2 swift strides he was beside her, cutting the rope with his hunting knife. She fell forward into his arms, solid, warm, safe. "Who did this to you?" he growled, fury rumbling beneath his calm. Her voice was barely a breath. "Thieves, looking for gold that never existed." He gathered her closer, his jaw tightening. "Then they'll pay for every mark they left on you." The man moved quickly but carefully, lowering Celeste onto the dusty floor. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and every inch of her body screamed with pain. The room stank of blood, sweat, and fear, and beneath it all, the faint sweetness of rot. "Stay with me," the man said, pulling a flask from his coat. "Small sips." The cool water hit her tongue like mercy. Tears welled in her eyes as he tipped the flask gently. "You'll be all right," he murmured. "Name's Thaddeus Blackstone. Folks used to call me Thad." "Celeste," she whispered. Her voice cracked like dry wood. "Celeste Hartwell." He nodded once, memorizing it. "All right, Miss Hartwell, let's get you out of this hellhole." He wrapped her in his coat, the thick wool still warm from his body, then lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Outside, the forest glowed gold and red with sunset. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and far below, thunder rumbled in the valley. She drifted in and out of consciousness as he carried her through the darkening woods. Once, when she woke, she saw his face, strong, scarred, and lined with exhaustion. His eyes, though, were the color of sky after rain, weary but gentle. "Why are you helping me?" she asked faintly. He didn't look at her. "Because no one else will." When they reached his cabin, Thad kicked the door open and laid her on a bed near the fire. The place was tidy, sparse, built for one man who had long ago stopped expecting company. He lit 2 lanterns, filled a basin with warm water, and began to clean her wounds. Celeste flinched when the cloth touched her skin. "Please, don't—" "Easy," he said softly. "I know it hurts. I fought in the war. I've patched worse, but you're safe now. I won't hurt you." His hands were steady, precise. The hands of a man who'd once known gentleness before life took it away. He worked until the cuts were clean and the bleeding stopped, then wrapped her in fresh bandages made from torn linen. When he finally sat back, Sweat streaked his temples. "You'll need rest and food. You've lost too much blood." "I have nothing to repay you," she said weakly. He shook his head. "Don't need repayment. I couldn't walk away from someone left like that." Celeste tried to smile but failed. "They said my father hid gold. I told them the truth, but they didn't believe me." Thad's eyes hardened. "People will believe lies if they think there's something in it for them. You rest now. Tomorrow I'll see to the rest." As he rose, Celeste caught his sleeve. "You're not like them, are you?" He met her gaze, and for the briefest moment she saw the shadow of something deep behind his calm. "No," he said quietly, "but I've done things I'm not proud of." The wind outside howled through the trees, and the fire flickered between them. Two strangers, both broken in different ways, both trying to forget the ghosts that still clung to their souls. When Celeste awoke the next morning, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and coffee. Light spilled through the cabin's window, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then the pain in her ribs returned, sharp and real. Thad sat at the table, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a bird. He looked up when she stirred. "You're awake?" he said simply. "Good. I was starting to think you'd sleep through the storm." Celeste tried to sit, wincing as the bandages pulled. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." He poured her a mug of warm broth and handed it to her carefully. "Drink slow. Your body's still catching up." She took a sip. It was salty, earthy, and the warmth spread through her like sunlight. "Thank you," she murmured. Thad leaned back, watching her in silence. His presence was quiet, grounded, like the mountain itself. The firelight picked out the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. She wondered what kind of man carried both that kind of wound and that kind of gentleness. "Do you live out here all alone?" she asked after a while. "Been that way near 5 years?" He turned the wooden bird in his hands. "Peaceful, no questions, no lies. Do you ever get lonely?" He paused, then said, "Sometimes." He looked at her. "Not so much lately." She blushed and looked away, pretending to study the crackling fire. Over the next few days, Thad helped her walk again. At first, she leaned on his arm for balance, but he was patient, always there, never pushing. They ventured out behind the cabin where the forest opened into a meadow streaked with wildflowers. "Breathe," he said one afternoon as she stood trembling from the effort of walking. "You're not broken, Celeste. You just forgot what it's like to stand on your own." She met his gaze, her eyes shining with tears. "You don't know what they did to me. They made me feel like I was nothing." His voice was low but fierce. "You're not nothing. You survived. That's more than most." Something inside her cracked open then, a fragile hope she hadn't dared to feel since before the pain began. That night, as rain whispered against the roof, she told him pieces of her story. About the night the men came, how they'd broken into her father's old shop, demanding gold that didn't exist, how she'd screamed until her voice was gone. Thad listened without interrupting, his hands folded, his jaw tight. When she finished, he said quietly, "I know what it's like to lose everything. My wife and daughter were killed in a raid years ago. Bandits. I came home too late." Celeste's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." He nodded, eyes far away. "After that, I stopped trying to fix people. Figured I wasn't meant to save anyone again." "But you did," she said softly. "You saved me." For the first time, his mouth curved into something almost like a smile. maybe we saved each other. The days blurred into rhythm, firelight, soft words, and the sound of rain on the roof. Celeste began to move with more strength, her laughter coming easier. Thad taught her to make salve from pine resin, to mend a torn shirt, to listen for the language of the forest. One evening, as twilight spilled through the trees, she sat beside him on the porch. "Thad," she said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were a ghost." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe I was." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "And now?" He met her eyes, his tone steady and warm. "Now, I'm a man who found a reason to breathe again." The mountains around them stood silent, as if bearing witness to two lost souls who had finally found a place to belong. By the end of the second week, Celeste could move freely through the cabin. Her steps were still careful, but her spirit, that fragile spark she thought the world had crushed, had begun to flicker back to life. The cabin itself seemed to change with her. What had once been a dark, lonely refuge for a haunted man now felt like a home. The table was always set for two. The fire burned longer into the night. Sometimes there was laughter, hesitant at first, then full and unrestrained, like sunlight after a long storm. Thad never spoke much about himself, but his actions spoke louder than words. He built her a chair near the window so she could sit and watch the forest bloom. He hunted softer game because she said she couldn't bear the smell of blood. And when she shivered in her sleep, he'd quietly drape his blanket over her shoulders before retreating to his own cot. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked him one morning as she kneaded dough. He paused in chopping wood. "Because someone should have been, long before now." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "I used to think kindness was a thing that ran out, like bread or money." He smiled faintly. "That's because you've only ever seen people who hoard it." Every evening they shared stories by the fire. Celeste told him about her father, the gentle man who made horseshoes and music boxes, who taught her that even broken things could be mended. Thad told her about his days as a soldier, the cold, the hunger, the brothers he buried in the mud. When he spoke of his wife and daughter, his voice went quiet. "Her name was Clara. Our girl was Daisy. They were light, all the light I had." Celeste reached across the table and took his hand. "You still have light, Thad. You just stopped seeing it." He looked at her then, really looked, at the fiery curls, the freckles across her cheeks, the softness that hardship hadn't destroyed. "Maybe you're right," he said softly. The next morning she found him outside carving wood again. Only this time it wasn't another bird. It was a heart, rough around the edges, but strong. "It's for the garden," he said when she asked. "Something to remind us that life keeps growing." They planted wild flowers beneath it. Celeste laughed as dirt streaked her hands, and he couldn't help but laugh too. A sound so rare and deep it startled even him. But the peace they were building was delicate. Some nights she'd wake from nightmares, screaming. Thad would be there instantly, steady and silent, holding her hand until her breathing slowed. "Don't be afraid," he'd whisper. "They're gone now. You're safe." "I keep seeing their faces," she'd sob. "The way they laughed when I begged." His grip tightened. "Then let me be the one who stays until you forget them." In return, Celeste began to heal him in ways he hadn't expected. She filled the silence of his life with warmth, humming while she cooked, hanging herbs by the rafters, talking to the plants as if they could hear. One night, She brought out the small music box her father had made, the only thing she'd managed to keep. The melody floated through the cabin, gentle, fragile, alive. Thad's voice was low. I'd forgotten what peace sounded like. Celeste looked up, tears in her eyes. It sounds like hope, doesn't it? He nodded slowly. It does when you're here. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their lives became one. Two survivors bound not by tragedy, but by the quiet understanding that both had been saved, not just once, but every day they chose to wake up and try again. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the treetops, Celeste turned to him. Thad, if those men ever come back, promise me you won't face them alone. He met her gaze, a slow smile tugging at his mouth. You planning to stand beside me, Miss Hartwell? She smiled back through tears. I'm done hiding. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. Then I reckon the world's got a fight coming. That night, the fire burned bright, not just for warmth, but for everything they'd begun to rebuild. Trust, safety, and a love that neither of them dared yet to name. The days that followed were calm, deceptively so. The forest whispered peace. The river hummed softly below the ridge, and for a moment it seemed as if the ghosts of Devil's Hollow had finally been laid to rest. But quiet never lasted long in places haunted by violence. It began with the tracks, deep boot prints in the damp soil near the edge of Thad's land. He noticed them first at dawn while fetching water. There were 4 sets, heavy and uneven like men moving in haste. His gut clenched. He knew the pattern well. When he returned to the cabin, Celeste was tending the fire, humming to herself. He didn't want to alarm her, so he said nothing. But that night he sat by the window with his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the tree line until the stars blurred into dawn. By the 3rd day, he couldn't hide it anymore. Something's wrong, isn't it? Celeste asked. Thad hesitated. Tracks near the creek. Men. Her face went pale. Them? Could be, he said quietly. Could also be travelers. Either way, I'll be ready. Celeste shook her head. You can't fight them alone, Thad. Not again. He gave her a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry, I've faced worse. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The thought of losing him, of those men returning to drag her back to that nightmare, was unbearable. She'd only just begun to feel human again. She couldn't lose that. At dawn, she found Thad outside cleaning his rifle. If they come, she said, voice trembling, I want to stand beside you. He looked up sharply. No, you'll stay inside. You hear me? I'm not the same woman they left hanging in that cabin, she said fiercely. You taught me that. His jaw tightened, torn between pride and fear. Celeste. She stepped closer, eyes bright with fire. I won't hide from the world any more, not even from the parts that terrify me. Something in her tone made him soften. He nodded slowly. All right, but you follow my lead. It wasn't long before the storm broke. Late one evening, as thunder rolled over the ridge, Thad spotted smoke on the horizon. Too thick, too deliberate. They were burning something. The same men, he realized. They were hunting, sending a message. He loaded his rifle in silence. Celeste watched from the doorway, her heart hammering. Thad, she whispered, what if they find this place? He looked at her, blue eyes burning with quiet determination. Then they'll wish they hadn't. But as he turned to go, she reached out and caught his arm. Promise me something. He frowned. What? That no matter what happens, if I get taken again, if they hurt me, you won't throw your life away for revenge. His throat tightened. I can't make that promise. You have to, she said, tears in her voice, because I can't live knowing I became another ghost in your story. For a long moment, the storm wind howled between them. Then Thad cupped her face in his calloused hands. You already changed my story, Celeste. And if those bastards come here again, they'll learn what kind of man you saved. She swallowed hard and nodded, knowing there would be no changing his mind. That night, the mountain seemed to hold its breath. The forest was too quiet, the air too heavy, as if the world itself was waiting. And when the first rifle shot split the silence, Celeste's blood ran cold. The first shot tore through the night like thunder. The glass of the cabin window shattered, scattering across the floor. Down! Thad barked, pushing Celeste behind the heavy table before crouching low with his rifle. Another bullet hit the doorframe, splintering the wood inches from his head. Outside, men's voices shouted, rough, eager, cruelly familiar. Come on out, Blackstone, one jeered. You've got something that belongs to us. Thad's voice cut through the noise. You want her? Come take her. He fired once. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley, and a scream followed, short, sharp, silenced by the storm. Celeste trembled, gripping the table leg. The scent of gunpowder filled the cabin. Thad, stay down, he ordered. He reloaded with swift precision, eyes calm and cold. Years of war had carved him into a weapon, but this fight was different. This one was for her. The men tried to circle the cabin, but Thad knew the terrain better than they ever would. He moved like a ghost, firing through cracks in the wall, shifting positions, never where they expected him to be. By the time two of them reached the porch, he was already there. The door flew open, and he struck the first man with the butt of his rifle. The second lunged, knife flashing in the dark, but Thad caught his arm and twisted until bone snapped. Celeste screamed as lightning flared, illuminating the chaos, the rain, the bodies, the fury in Thad's eyes. When the last man standing turned to run, Thad raised his gun. Don't! Celeste cried. He's beaten! Please! Her voice cut through the rage like light through fog. Thad's finger tightened on the trigger, then relaxed. The man fled into the woods, limping, vanishing into the storm. Silence settled, heavy, trembling, broken only by the sound of rain dripping from the roof. Thad stood in the doorway, chest heaving. Mud streaked his face, blood smeared across his shirt, but his eyes found her and softened. It's over, he said quietly. Celeste rose slowly, legs shaking, and crossed the room to him. You could have killed him. I would have, Thad admitted, voice raw. But then I saw you, and I remembered what I was fighting for. She reached up, cupping his face with trembling hands. For us. He nodded. For us. Outside, the storm broke apart into soft rain. The mountain exhaled, and for the first time since either of them could remember, the world felt still. Morning came pale and quiet, the mist curling low through the trees like breath. Smoke still rose from the spent gunpowder around the cabin, and the earth smelled of rain, metal, and survival. Celeste stepped out onto the porch wrapped in Thad's coat. The sunlight caught in her hair, painting it copper. Below, the forest stretched endless and green, peaceful again, as if the night's violence had never touched it. Thad stood by the steps, staring toward the river, his rifle slung loosely at his side. There was exhaustion in every line of his body, but also something new, relief. It's really over, isn't it?" she asked softly. He turned toward her, eyes clear for the first time in years. "Yeah, it's over." Celeste moved closer, resting a hand on his arm. "You could have killed them all." "I almost did," he said quietly. "But if I had, I'd have lost the part of me you helped bring back." She smiled through her tears. "Then maybe we both survived more than we thought." He reached up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You're stronger than you know, Celeste. You were never just a victim." "And you were never the monster they said you were," she replied. "You're the man who saved me, and saved himself along the way." For a long moment they stood there in the golden light, the mountain wind whispering through the pines. Thad finally spoke, his voice low. "You're safe here, always will be." Celeste looked up at him, eyes glimmering with quiet certainty. "Home isn't a place, Thad. It's you." He smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after surviving hell, and pulled her close as the morning sun broke fully over Devil's Hollow. Pain may leave scars, but compassion leaves something stronger, healing. Celeste was broken, forgotten, and left to die, yet kindness found her in the form of a man who had lost his faith in humanity. Through love, they both learned that survival isn't just about living, it's about feeling again. No matter how cruel the world becomes, there will always be someone who chooses mercy over vengeance, love over hate. Wherever you are in the world, tell me, do you still believe love can rebuild what pain has destroyed? Because the next story is for those who do.